When do you ever, Mark, arrive at the horizon? Never, because the earth is round. And that horizon is so beautiful. High achievers are often chasing the horizon. And one of the things that I get the most is getting them to just stop. Can you just stop? And can we look at this horizon for a second? And can you just appreciate how beautiful your life feels when you stop chasing? Chasing is tiring and exhausting.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's super great to be with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspectives, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I have to start by asking you, what does peak performance mean to you?
When a client is in peak performance, it's a state of flow where they're having fun, it's not hard, and they could do it forever without pay.
What makes that peak performance and not just performance?
Well, I think we perform at a lot of things where it takes a lot of work and maybe we're going against the grain and we're not using our natural strengths. So when we're in that state of flow, it's easy, it's fun, we're enjoying ourselves. And again, we would do it if even if we weren't getting paid because it's something that lights us up inside.
You focus on helping elite business owners overcome barriers mostly related to fulfillment and then obviously performance. What are some of the most common barriers among high achievers?
I think one of the greatest barriers is from the outside looking in, their life looks good. And everybody thinks they're just killing it, not just in business, but in their relationship, in their family, in their community. When in reality, when you open up that box and you see what's inside, it doesn't feel as good for that person as it looks. And so, this feeling of if people only knew what my life was really like. And then there's this imposter syndrome that follows. I see that time and time again.
When they are thinking that their life is good and they're performing amazingly in all these areas, what is usually the pain point they're feeling when they reach out to you?
It's usually because somebody has said, you need to talk to Andrew, because that person that has been confided in has shown them that their relationship is not as good as they think it is, that their perception of life of success is actually falling apart, and they're pretending like it's not because they're too afraid to admit what they're really afraid of.
I really like how you said they're pretending that it's not. So, at some sense, they do know. They just don't want to admit it to themselves first and definitely not to others.
That's right. Because if they admit it, then it means they're not succeeding and they are addicted to achievement and success. Because that is where so many great business people and leaders get their identity from. And to take that identity away is a scary thing for them.
You also spoke about imposter syndrome. You are working with extremely successful business owners. We usually associate imposter syndromes with people in their beginning stages where they're thinking, I may not be good enough to even start or continue, or I'm going to inevitably fail. What is the version of imposter syndrome that you see in the really highly successful people?
So let me give you an example. We'll call him Mr. Brown. Okay. Mr. Brown owns a large corporation that provides products to known stores all across America. And he has been running this business for decades. And Mr. Brown has lost his wife and he is in a new relationship with someone. And this relationship is thriving because she is taking care of his physically disabled adult son. Now, I meet Mr. Brown because this woman who is now his life partner, who's taking care of his adult son, comes to me and says, Andrew, I'm not married to him. And we are living together, and I'm helping to raise this adult son of his. And we have the most incredible relationship we've ever had. And I'm scared to death of what will happen when he dies because there is no place of security for me. I don't have any access to his money. And it's something that I would never want to bring up to him because I don't want him to think that I'm in this relationship because of the money issue. And she said, I don't want to have to start over again when I'm 60 some years old. And we know that he is one of the most philanthropic people in the community that he lives in. He's giving, and she doesn't want to come and ask him to give something. And he doesn't know. He has no idea how much this is tearing at her. And I build rapport with her. She introduces me to him, and we begin to mend something that he didn't even know was broken because she didn't have the courage to go to him from this place of vulnerability. And now we're working with both of them to help them come together and to strengthen what they already have that's there that wasn't as broken as she thought that it might have been. And I guarantee you, if you were to ask him, did you know that this was a problem? He would say, honestly, no, I had no idea because I thought everything was great. So there's
Very interesting. So the imposter syndrome in this example is on behalf of the woman who feels if she goes and asks to be married to, then the
Yep.
person is just gonna, the husband or the man is just, Mr. Brown is just going to think that she's after the money.
That's right. And if Mr. Brown doesn't do it, then he's going to have this feeling of imposter. Am I or am I not in integrity? And it's interesting because sometimes we know that something is wrong, but we don't know why. And for him, it took her opening up and being honest and vulnerable because something probably just felt off. He didn't know what it was, but it just felt off.
Interesting. With high performers, they're always pushing the limits, always pushing the limits. There's disappointment sometimes because you set yourself up for goals that are simply not achievable, or maybe not achievable in the tiny time frame that you allowed it for yourself. So a lot of high performers, despite being amazing, always feel like garbage.
Yeah.
Right? How do you help your clients bring balance and fulfillment to the areas in where they feel they are quote unquote failing?
Right. I'm sure you've heard this analogy of the horizon. When do you ever, Mark, arrive at the horizon? Never, because the earth is round. And that horizon is so beautiful. High achievers are often chasing the horizon. And one of the things that I get the most, traction with these people is getting them to just stop. Can you just stop? And can we look at this horizon for a second? And can you just appreciate how beautiful your life feels when you stop chasing? Chasing is tiring and exhausting. And when we can sit here and be present and realize that your life actually feels a lot better than you're allowing it to feel, and that everyone else that sees what you're chasing, that's why they say that your life looks so good because your life actually is good. And you're not giving yourself permission to enjoy it because you believe, again, that your worth and your value and your identity is only tied to your ability to reach that horizon that you're chasing, which you'll never get to.
Very interesting when you talked about giving yourself permission to feel joy and be able to enjoy life with what they have created. From a much deeper perspective, do you think that they feel that even though to us they have reached a goal and surpassed the goal, for them, is there a feeling of not being good enough that makes them continue to push towards that?
As cliche as it might sound to the listener and to you today, always, I've done this with almost 300 people now in the last 7 years where we spend over 5 hours together over 2 days diving deep. It always comes back to a feeling of worth, good enough, smart enough, or lovable. And all of that is grounded in our value and our worth. And there are decisions that we make in our formative years, right? Neuroscience teaches that our brains up until the age of 7, 8, 9 are developing. And then once we hit about 8 years old, 95 to 99% of our personal reality, right? Our personality, our beliefs are already set by the time we're 8 or 9 years old. And so these high achieving entrepreneurs, these business owners and leaders, they have made an unconscious decision that they have to prove their worth and value and that they are only good enough when they reach such and such standards that are set by others and then eventually themselves. And as soon as I can help them break that pattern by using a very powerful process that I am certified in within neuro-linguistic programming, as soon as we can help them break that, it's as relieving as literally letting off a 180-pound pack from your back. And they give themselves permission, not something I do. They give themselves permission to be present and just feel what it's like to not have to chase or carry that burden any longer.
When it comes to the analogy you give about Mr. Brown
Yeah.
and not realizing, just being unaware of the fact that person who's taking care of the disabled son is looking for some type of security. When you talk about lack of understanding of one in terms of self-worth, that's under falls under the umbrella of really self-awareness. If I am listening to this and I'm thinking, I don't know what my blind spots are, what would Andrew say? What are some beginner things, exercises they could do to maybe start discovering this, maybe recognizing the self, being self aware?
Can I share a story with you about how I've done this?
Please do.
I'm the youngest of 5 children. My parents have over 30 grandchildren amongst all of us. And there was a moment where I was in a vehicle driving for 5 hours with my two of my older sisters and my older brother. One of the sisters was already at the destination. So I had, as the little brother, I had my two older sisters, my older brother. We were all in the car for 5 hours with none of our children or spouses. This was a very unique situation that has not been replicated since. And in that car ride, I asked them, I said, you three know me just about as well as anyone else on this planet. And I recognize that there are things in me as an individual, as a husband, as a father, as a leader that I don't see. And I give you permission right here, right now, during this car ride, and for the rest of my life to call me out on blind spots that might be hurting myself or others around me. Will you please do that? And I had no idea the fire hose that I just turned on and the floodgates that were coming my way. And yet I go back to them and I remind them. And so one of the things that you can do if you are stuck in this place of unconscious incompetence, meaning I don't even know what I don't know, would
Mhm.
be to just ask those that you love and trust and give them permission to be honest and open and direct and tell them, hey, I'm sensitive, so please don't bring the 2x4 and hit me over the forehead. I'd much prefer a pool noodle. It'll be annoying, but it won't knock me out. And because I am a highly sensitive person, I tell my siblings and anyone else that I give permission to do this. Hey, take it easy because I'm sensitive. I might cry and get defensive for a moment, but I'll be grateful that you did it.
As a coach, you're working with a business leader, you're using NLP techniques, you're taking the 80-pound weight off their back. At some point, they're feeling liberated, but they have some problems that they truly don't know the answers to. How do you approach someone, help them find their own answers instead of just providing them with a solution that most coaches do?
Yeah, and those coaches are, I don't even know a kind way to say this. Those coaches aren't coaching. Those coaches are consulting, and consultants get paid to tell people what to do. So I believe that the best coaches in the world view the person sitting in front of them in three specific ways. So it starts with number one, this person and every human on this planet, but specifically this person that I'm coaching is creative. I don't have to create the solutions that they're looking for. They have that creative ability inside them because they are human. Number two, they are resourceful. They have better resources to find solutions that they are creating than I do because they are in it and they know themselves and their tribe better than I do. They are creative, they are resourceful, and number three, they are whole. They're not broken. They don't need me to fix them. I am not the savior of this individual. So when I can approach someone with that kind of perspective and belief that they are creative, resourceful, and whole, I don't have to tell them that. I just treat them that way. And it gives them the capacity to then treat themselves as if they are creative, resourceful, and whole because I put it all on them. What happens is when this person ends up winning, let's think of a professional sport like the NFL. When the football team wins the Super Bowl, who gets paid more, the quarterback or the coach? It's the quarterback. Now, when the team is losing at the time of this recording, okay, the New York Jets just fired their head coach because their all-star quarterback, right? Their all-star quarterback hasn't been performing as well as he could, but guess who they fired? They fired the coach, not Aaron Rodgers. And so when my clients win, they get recognized and they make more money than I do. And they are the ones that get the headlight. And that's what great coaches do. They stand back on the side of the field and they watch their people become MVPs and Hall of Famers. And they don't care. They're just happy to see people succeed. That's what the greatest coaches that I've seen and that I've worked with, that's what they do.
You're a coach, you are busy, you are literally changing lives. That is time demanding. You have a family that you love, that you're committed towards. That's a very big priority. But you also mentor young adults as part of your passion project. You don't have to do that. Why do you do it? And what has influenced your approach coaching business leaders having coached that?
I don't know about you, Mark, but the 18, 19, 20, all the way up to 28-year-old, and even till today, that version of myself had people in my life that saw things in me that I couldn't see in me. And I didn't pay them. They did it because they loved me. They did it because they saw something in me that I couldn't see myself. They did it because they didn't want me to have to make the same mistakes that maybe they had made. And if I can pass that on to someone from the ages of 18 through whatever, 30, then I know that I'm leaving a legacy that goes far beyond my coaching clients. That's why I do it, because I've had those people and I want to be that person for this next generation. Now, there was a second part to that question. Will you ask me that again? Because I think that was important enough that I want the listeners to hear it and I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Second part of the question was, having coached these young adults,
Yeah.
learnings do you have from coaching this community that kind of helps you coach the business leaders in your real business?
I think all of us still have some young adult in us. And I don't treat my older adult clients like young adults, but I think a lot of those insecurities, am I good enough? Am I likable? Am I lovable? Will I be able? I think that it's the same stuff, just in a more complex manner, because now there are businesses and relationships and children. And these people serve in their nonprofits on the boards and their chairmen and their churches. There's a lot at stake. And that golden thread that we can track back through young adulthood all the way to childhood, it continues unless we break it. So we all have that insecure young adult in us to some degree or another if we haven't taken that golden thread out.
Is it ever possible to get rid of that insecurity?
Absolutely.
What does life look like when that has happened?
Peak
How do we
performance,
go
Mark.
about life that way?
It looks like peak performance. It looks like when I make a mistake as a husband and father, which happens at least on a daily basis, I don't feel the guilt for very long. I feel it for a moment, which allows me to change my behavior, my approach, rather than to say, who the hell do you think you are? What gives you the right to treat her that way? They deserve a better father. And so that voice, I'm able to recognize it and shut it off immediately so I don't have to stay in a negative emotion. That negative emotion only stays like a fire alarm until you put out the fire. So as soon as I can realign my thoughts back to who I know I am, I'm a good man, I'm doing my best, no one expects me to be perfect, then I don't have to feel the guilt. And that is, it takes a high degree of emotional intelligence. I don't pretend to be perfect at it. And yet some days I can nail it.
Whether it be the young adults that you're working with, whether it be the high performing business leaders you're working with, they all have goals.
Yeah.
Goal setting is the most searched term on search engines. So, what is Andrew's way of helping clients set goals in areas where they feel they're underperforming?
The time of this recording, it's the month of October, and this is when I actually have all of my clients plan an entire day or 2 half days to look back on the year, because January 1st is the worst time to set goals. We take the momentum from Q4 into Q1. And I don't call it goal setting. I don't call it business planning anymore. What I call it is vision creation. And I actually just shot a YouTube video, which will be launching next week, called 2025 Vision Creation. So instead of goals, which are what do I need to do right now, we go with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey taught us, right? What is my someday vision? What is my 10-year vision? What is my 5-year vision? And do these need to change based on where I've come this year? And so when we can get clarity on the long-term vision and the values that are driving that vision, along with our life mission. So vision, mission, and values. Those are the three important pieces that I walk people through. Do I have clarity in my long-term life mission, the vision, and the values? And what have I learned this past year and what needs to change to help me move in that direction? And I take people through about 60 questions to evaluate where they've come and clarify where they're going. And goals are the very last thing that we get to in that process.
When we talk about the vision, mission, values process, I assume that a lot of people who are talking about this are doing this exercise, are mapping out who they want to be next year and some components of what they want to do.
Right.
And sometimes what we want to do are new things.
Yeah.
But sometimes what we also want to do and who we want to become is because we are stuck somewhere in our life right now. What advice do you give to someone who feels stuck in an area of life but isn't really sure where to start making changes?
So all of these clients that are doing this work for 2025, they've gone through this process called the ultimate breakthrough experience with me, and we've gotten them unstuck. In fact, I don't ever want to help anyone set a goal unless we've gotten them out of a stuck state first. For example, you and I are standing at the bottom of this beautiful rock wall in Yosemite National Park. And you're the greatest rock climber in the world, Mark. Congratulations. And I am the greatest rock climbing coach in the world. And we are going to set a new record that will go in the Guinness books, never to be broken, for how quickly you scale this space. You've prepared well the night before, you practiced the line, You got the funny shoes and the chalk and the whole thing. The film crew's there, the official timer. I say go, and you say, wait, what about the pack? And I say, don't worry about it. You're built for this. And you're like, yeah, but it's a 180-pound pack. And I say, go. You're going to start climbing. And eventually you're going to quit because of two things. Either you believe that you're not good enough to do this, and you can't meet my expectations as your coach. Or number two, I'm crazy. So you're either going to quit on yourself or you're going to quit on me. And then you're going to go hire a new coach. What I do with all my clients that feel stuck, that they're carrying something that's making it hard to achieve their goals, is we don't unpack the pack and then tell you to bring it back next week, like a lot of counseling and therapists do. And I don't just push you beyond and try to strengthen you as a lot of coaches do. We just let it go. And we use very powerful neuroscience procedures to make that happen. And once you let it go, then I look at you and I say, hey, Mark, do you want to climb this peak or do you want to do a free dive in the ocean? Maybe you want to go and do the exact opposite. And so many people are tied to their goals based on believing that's going to be the thing that gets them out of their stuck state, to just find that they're now at the top of that peak, still stuck. So my recommendation is get past your stuff that's making you feel stuck. Get rid of your baggage and ask yourself, do I really want this? Or do I want something else in my life?
You wrote a bestseller, Strength of the Oak, Strength of the Willow.
Right
And in
here.
that book, there you go. In the book, you talk about balancing strength and flexibility.
Yes.
How do you define these qualities and why are they important for navigating this world?
What a wonderful question. You are so good at what you do. So the oak has a strength such that it won't break in turbulent storms. It's grounded. It's one of the hardest woods that we have, right? We use it to make all kinds of things, from cabinets to ships, oars and kegs, all baseball bats. So the oak has that grounded strength. And then the willow has a very different strength. Its strength comes from its ability to, as you said, flex, to bend without breaking. And if it does break, guess what? It drops one of those branches into the ground, which is usually next to a source of water, and it immediately will begin to grow a new tree. And so it continues to give life. All of us have this strength of the oak that I call courage within us. All of us have this strength of the willow that I call compassion. And usually we lean one way or the other. We're either too courageous and sometimes we get ourselves in trouble, or we're too compassionate and we don't stand up for ourselves. We have it within us, and they're not competing, they are complementary. And when we can recognize, what kind of strength do I need right now? Do I need to stand strong to my principles and my mission? Or do I need to be a little bit more flexible and willing to let go of things to help me get where I want to be in the long run? That counterbalance is a beautiful thing that I ask all of my clients, and I ask my coaches personally and my mentors and my siblings to make sure that I am keeping in perspective. Because if not, then things do break and we get hurt.
In the book, you also talk about vulnerability. Tell us a little bit about how vulnerability plays in developing both inner strength and compassion.
I had a great leader of a coaching organization that I was a part of years ago who taught me that people will always be influenced by your successes. At the time, we didn't have influencers. That wasn't a thing, like social media influencers. So I love that she said this before that was a thing. She said, people will be influenced by your successes, but they will be impacted by your failures. And she said, do you want to be influential or impactful? The ability to be vulnerable as a leader is the ability to open up our doors of imposter syndrome, let people in, and show them that we don't have everything figured out. And as Marianne Williamson said, as we are liberated from our own fears, and in this case, it's the fear of being vulnerable, we automatically give other people permission to do the same. And so the people that we look up to the most, we don't say, I look up to them because they're the most successful. We usually say, I look up to them because they're really humble. And I feel like want to help me, and they seem to care about me, and they don't pretend to have everything figured out. In fact, they're asking me how they could be helped by me. And they're vulnerable, they're humble, and they're not afraid. They're not afraid to let people in. And very few transformation leaders have that quality. We have great servant-based leadership in our nation and around the world. And I think the great thought leaders, the Jim Rohns and the Stephen Coveys of the 1990s, the Mark Victor Hansons and Jack Canfields, they taught this servant-based leadership. And that has served us well. But if you are serving without transforming yourself and others, then you're missing out on what it means to be a leader today.
We live in a society where two things are happening all the time. Either we're peacocking, we're showing ourselves to be bigger than we are, for
Yeah.
views, for likes, for praise, God knows. Simultaneously, we also live in a society where we are almost taught to be either the or the willow. Can you give an example, a real life scenario, whether it be someone at a workplace, someone in a relationship, just something specific where it demonstrates the example of the embodiment of oak and willow at the same time in their daily life?
Yeah, how about my own life? 'Cause that's the one that I know the best. I have a daughter, and someday she may hear this and be like, "Why were you talking about me?" But I got permission from my wife to talk about all my kids at some point or another in my book, and so hopefully she'll forgive me for talking about her. She's 14 years old. Her name is Tacy. She's amazing. And Tacy has perfect pitch. She can sing notes without even hearing them first. And if a note is being played, she can match it immediately. My wife has been training her in piano since she was a little girl, 4 or 5 years old. And she's had other piano teachers because my wife doesn't want to be the mom, the homeschool teacher, and the piano teacher. She felt like mom and homeschool teacher were enough. And my daughter has become a very good pianist. She also is a very good violinist. And after 4 years of doing violin, she told us that she didn't want to anymore. Now, I'm not stereotyping, but from what I've understood, in a lot of other cultures, specifically like Eastern cultures, like in Asia, the children don't get to choose what they do and don't do when it comes to their hobbies and even their schooling and their careers. And I was devastated because I know how good she is with pitch, how good she is at the piano, how good she is at singing. And I was thinking about all the opportunities and the people she'd be able to bless with her music. And it really tore at me. And if I had stayed strong with what I thought was right for her, I would have taken away the ability for her to not only miss out on those opportunities and learn the lessons she needed to learn herself, but also to pick up new hobbies and new skills, things that she might thrive at even more so than the violin. Now, if we go too far on this permissive, then it becomes we don't require anything of our children. And so, what we had to do as a husband and wife, as her parents, we sat down, we made a list. We said, what do we really want for our children? Do we really want them to play instruments? Are we okay if it ends up being art or sports or something else, computers, heaven forbid, or video games? And once we realize what we want them to do is pursue passions with work ethic and commitment and dedication, then she allowed even our son to stop playing the piano and pick up the guitar, even though the piano is so important to her. And so if we get too stuck on what we believe others need in their life based on what we think, then we take away that great principle that I think is given to us by God, which is free will and free agency. And if we don't hold people responsible and accountable, then that free will and free agency becomes anarchy, and then they end up destroying themselves in their lives. So there really is that beautiful counterbalance of freedom and responsibility, oak and willow, and being authoritative without being authoritarian, permitting and allowing them to grow without being permissive and laissez-faire. So there's an example from my own life.
How does one maintain this balance or find this balance when they're looking in their own lives? Because as entrepreneurs, there are things we absolutely don't like doing, but that just needs to be done. Is that a sign that we should just push through and get it done because it's needed to be done? Or is it a sign that we are chasing it, like you said earlier, and it's a sign that's meant to say, hey, this is not it, we should move on? If I'm listening to this and I'm struggling with this, what advice would you give them?
Ask the people that have the most at stake based on this decision what they think, right? So get perspective from others, get perspective from outside the decision as well, from a coach or a mentor or a friend. And then the next question is, if this doesn't spark joy for me, and if it's not something I feel like I want to passionately pursue on my own, then who would love doing this? I love mowing my lawn. I love teaching my boys and my daughters how to mow the lawn. I'm never going to pay anyone to do that. I don't ever want to touch my car. So somebody changes my oil and my air filter, and they love doing that, and they love getting paid for it. So if you're at a place, number one, ask those around you that can provide perspective. Does this really need to be done? And then, am I willing to pay the price either by buckling down and just doing it myself, or literally pay the price to have someone else do it that would enjoy it? That would be my advice.
You're very successful, you're very busy, you're doing important work in your business, you're doing important work in your community. I'm sure you're doing important work in other areas that I didn't even know about in my research. I also know you have a happy marriage and a loving wife, and I believe 7 kids. Did I get that right?
Yes.
In a world where People are always making excuses. In a world where we have a responsibility to raise our children the right way, how do you manage being a great dad, great husband, a great community leader, a great business owner? How do you do that?
I had to learn how not to.
How
And
not?
because you've read my book, chapter one starts with me living in my parents' basement at 28 years old, having just finished a master's degree, moving back into my hometown, going into year 7 of teaching, having baby girl number 3, and all within the same month, also having a wife that told me she didn't want to be married anymore. So all of a sudden, my degree doesn't matter. I no longer have this career teaching that I thought I would have forever. I'm not spending every day with my children. And this marriage that I thought would last through eternity has now come to a screeching halt. And that place of perceived imprisonment in my parents' basement, where I believed that I had failed my daughters, my students, my wife, and ultimately God, was a huge wake up call. And I realized that I had expectations of myself that were unrealistic. And I was going through my own version of imposter syndrome, which I continue to go through to different degrees throughout my life. I didn't fail in my marriage. I didn't fail in that first career, and I haven't failed as a father. I've just gotten great feedback on how to do them better. In NLP, we say there is no failure, only feedback. And when I treat my wife in a way that I'm not pleased with, like it happened last night, I apologize and I ask for forgiveness. And I don't have expectations that I'm going to be perfect. And I make mistakes with 3.5 teenage daughters. And I ask them for forgiveness. And I say, I've never done this before. I'm just figuring it out. And what I want my children to know about me someday is not what I wrote in my book. It's not what I've said on a podcast or in a speech or anything. What I want them to know is that they had a very imperfect father who always asked for forgiveness and did whatever he could to make it right, so that they can go through their lives being okay with failure and getting feedback and asking others for forgiveness and doing everything to make it right. And I think if everyone had that approach, we certainly wouldn't need the attorneys and the mediators, and we wouldn't have the challenges that we have throughout the world today that go all the way up to war. Stephen Covey, at the end of his life, he was mediating between heads of states, preventing wars that could have happened that none of us even know about at the very highest level. So he's one of my favorite mentors because he did that. And I think he probably did it at home with his children as well.
Andrew, in a world of coaching, in a world of tactics, in a world of trying to sell something just to make some money with false promises, it's refreshing to meet and be able to talk to someone who is not only helping people find themselves, overcome them obstacles, become a better version of themselves, but also grounding that in reality and honesty. Honesty is at a premium cost these days. We are no longer honest with ourselves. We are no longer honest with each other. And it seems like the core foundation, the kernel of everything that you teach and everything that you say comes from that. There's no doubt in my mind why you are so successful and why your clients are so successful. It's been an honor and a pleasure talking to you, getting to know how you think, and getting to know how you help others. Any last words for our audience members?
Thank you. And I'm not just saying that. There was a moment there where you almost made me cry because I could feel that you weren't just asking a normal question or saying, like, it wasn't scripted. You actually had your eyes closed and you were speaking from your heart. And so the last thing that's coming to me right now is what one of my great mentors, Kevin Hall, taught me. And he says, never let your head talk you out of something that your heart knows to be true. When we do, we're not acting from courage, we're acting from fear, and we're justifying it with logic and with our mind. Your heart will never lie. And when you lean in to your heart and you act in that place of courage, you will not only be leading yourself in integrity, but you will be bringing others along in that same space.
For being on the show. I hope we talk soon again.
I believe we will. You're welcome.
Awesome.